Why did I write a book about an oil refinery? Because this was never really a book about oil. It is a book about why Africa has stayed poor and what can finally change that. I have spent years studying African economic history, and one pattern kept repeating itself: raw materials leaving the continent, finished value arriving from somewhere else. Gold during empire, rubber during colonialism, oil during independence. Different resources, same pattern. Generation after generation, century after century. When I first read about the Dangote Refinery, I realized it wasn't simply another business story. It was a direct challenge to that centuries-old pattern. This refinery represents something bigger than crude oil and steel towers. It represents the idea that Africa can finally process its own value instead of exporting it away. I believe industrialization is not optional for Africa's future. It is the difference between a continent that supplies the world and one that actually builds alongside it. A young, fast-growing population needs real jobs, not just raw materials shipped elsewhere to be turned into products. Africa then has to buy back. You do not need an economics degree to understand this story. You simply need one basic idea. Value should stay where the work begins. People connect with authors before they ever connect with their books. So let me be honest about why this particular story mattered enough to write down. I wanted to show that Africa's biggest problem was never a lack of resources. It was never having the capacity to turn those resources into lasting wealth. The Dangote Refinery gave me a real concrete example. One man, one enormous bet, and an entire industry built to finally break that old pattern. I wanted readers, whether they know economics or not, to see themselves in this story. In the doubt, in the resistance, and eventually, in the result. This book explains in plain language how one African refinery took on a global system that has kept the continent at the bottom of value chains for generations. It explains what changes when a country refines its own oil, creates its own jobs, and finally keeps more of its own value at home. And it explains why that change matters far beyond Nigeria, as a signal for what an entire continent of over 1 billion people could still become. The Dangote Refinery is proof this can be done, refining locally, producing locally, and building real lasting wealth instead of simply extracting it. If this story resonates with you at all, I wrote this book to help you understand why it matters and why I believe it is only the beginning. If you'd like to understand how one African entrepreneur challenged centuries of economic dependency, read my book, Dangote Refinery: How One African Refinery Broke the Raw Material Trap and Saved the World. Available now on Amazon.